This is Destin Gerek, and
This is Michael Author.
and we are. Oh, I'm a little too far over to the side. How this is probably a little bit better. We're doing our Decoding Women podcast today as an AMA, and Ask Me and Michael. So maybe it's an Amama. Ask Me and Michael anything, or Ask Me and Michael Author anything. Amama. We've been having questions coming in. We would decide to use this as a means to really explore these questions that are asked of us all the time. Men tend to come into our world from one of three major areas. Either he has something going on with his relationship to himself as a man and what that means in 2022 and beyond, his relationship to his masculinity and what does a healthy, more evolved masculinity look like, and knowing, getting the messages of what not to do or be, but not quite sure what to do or be instead. That's one set of men. I'm going to also put into that the realm of his desire to just deepen his sense of confidence and the vision of the man that he wants to be in the world.
Inner game.
Another way of putting it. The second major area is what we call sexual self-mastery. He has something going on around his sexuality, how he connects to his sexuality, whether it's performance, how long he's lasting, or the state of his erections, or maybe it's just overall sense of confidence with himself as a lover, or this fear or knowing. Hey Josh, good to have you here. His fear or knowing that his lover has had better lovers before him, and how that can really affect a man's confidence. And the third major area we refer to as understanding women and the feminine. This is really about how to have healthy, functioning, thriving, hot relationships with women, as well as to deepen our understanding of the distinction between women and the feminine, including the feminine that actually exists inside of us as men, and how to relate to that. So these tend to be the three main things that draw people into our world, including you, Josh, here. And we want to use this AMA as just a means to, okay, so I have yet to meet a man ever who doesn't have some issue, some struggle, something going on in at least one of these areas, often all three. So here's your opportunity. We have a few questions that have come in to start, and Josh, since you're the first one to pop,
we'll do you first.
Yeah, since you're the first one to pop in here, we'll use your question.
Great question, by the way.
Yeah, really pretty intense too. So glad I like intense. So I'm gonna read it out loud. He said, "I keep running into the same pattern with women. They always see me as a friend. Can any of you relate?" And now here's the big one. At 35, I'm still a virgin and I've never had a girlfriend. I feel like I've been hiding a part of my masculine, or possibly that there's sexual shame underneath. For whatever reason, women like being around me, but aren't interested in something sexual or romantic with me. I've read books, hired coaches, done medicine journeys, but I'm still getting the same results. How do I break this cycle? So, first of all, I want to just silence these notifications. But aside from that, what I'd like to do is really acknowledge you for your willingness to share that really openly and vulnerably, as you wrote here. Ouch, that hurts to even hear it back. Yeah, I'm sure it hurts even more to live it. While your case here is on the more extreme end, and just so you know, we've had other men enter our world who have nearly identical.
Yeah, it's not as uncommon as you might imagine.
That said, the 35 plus year old virgin, is the more extreme end of it. But even stripping that part away, there are invariably going to be many men who end up watching and listening to this who end up feeling like they are constantly, quote unquote, friend zoned, how they are interested in women. Great, we'll get to that in a second. Who they're interested in women, but women seem to be very comfortable with them. They're a safe guy. They're the nice guy, but he just watches her go after one other guy after another, and just want to hang out, chill, get his help with what have you, but not actually
giving so much of their energy and feeling that the thing that they want most is not available to them.
So unfortunately, this has led to this gets addressed or spoken to a lot in a lot of the darker corners of the internet. A lot. And I want to acknowledge you, Josh, for the fact that it sounds like you don't you haven't gotten lost into those darker corners of, like red pill, MGTOW,
black pill.
Yeah, and the overall manosphere related stuff, which I don't tend to talk about too often, mostly because I just think that much of it is toxic, and other parts of it are just, in my opinion, tainted. And what they're tainted with is misogyny. They're tainted with a sense of, I am not getting what I want and believe that I deserve, and it's women's fault. And what I'm hearing from you, and that's great, so definitely have not gotten lost in those corners. And, what I'm hearing from you, I don't feel you pointing the blame outward, but really looking inward. And
what can I do?
What can I do? What am I not understanding here, and how do I address this within myself? Which, to me, that is the only powerful approach. Any of those places of blame, shame, can make a man feel better himself in the short term, but it doesn't actually put him into any place to create any real and lasting change. We can't change them out there. We can change us in here. So there's a lot of backstory. I had some hesitancy starting with yours, Josh, because there's so much I want to say in response to it. He added that he has had some fun kink-related experiences and encounters, for what it's worth. So that's cool. So it just sounds like, but you haven't had the whole PIV intercourse thing, but that some kinds of sexy experiences. I am curious, Josh, since we are in here in this way. What is if you've been able to create these fun kinky experiences? What's different there? Why are you able to create those experiences with some women, experiences that there are other men who
never had anything like that,
and have sex and have no clue how they would open a woman into having a more kinky experience? And you said that, but you haven't had a girlfriend or a real relationship. Okay. But also sounds like you haven't had sexual intercourse either. So again, I'm just curious, since we're here live with you, how you ended up in these kinky experiences. Did you go to some specifically kink-oriented event? Do you have a particular way that you speak about kink to women? Is there a way that you're noticing that that she's already into kink? You're saying that the kink experiences that you have had were where you are the more submissive. Where you've been the more submissive person. These have been play partners. Great. But I want to get back to, again, so how are you meeting these people? And it sounds like, if I understand some of your comments already, at least some of these partners have been women. How are you meeting these people and having, so you go to kink-oriented events, become friends with women who are open to play. Okay. But you're feeling okay, they're open to play because they're sexually open women who are kink-friendly, sexually open women, and you're a willing, submissive man. And so sure, we could play out a scene, but I'm not actually romantically, sexually interested in you. And I'm not actually interested in having any form of a real ongoing relationship with you. Am I understanding that correctly, Josh? Well, while I wait for you to respond, I will, and feel free to chime in here at any point.
Yeah, I would. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, dealing with there's a couple of just brute force options, right, that you can deal with. One would be kind of continuing along that path of exploring kink and sex positive events. There are actual play parties that you can go to with open sexuality available. Get clear on your requests, make them in those spaces, even be vulnerable and say to them, I've never, for example, can we say this on Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay, I've never had my dick sucked. I'd love to have my dick sucked by one or more women. Right? And you just literally present that to all the people at the party. Chances are you're going to get it. right?
Because I think that what Michael is speaking on here, particularly because what you are in, you're already experienced with entering into sex positive spaces and environments where people are self-selecting, the men and women there and others are self-selecting into the space as people who are sexually open, who are, in your case as well, kink open, you know what I'm saying, and and have a greater degree of comfort with also speaking about these things.
So that's brute force option number one.
Yeah, and you're adding in that you are more interested in a monogamous relationship, and while play partners are fun, you're less interested in just having random play partners. So just to get a little more clear here, you're just responding to it, so I'll wait. He said, I'm sure I could find a woman to have sex with if that's what I really wanted to, but it's more of that sexual, romantic, committed relationship I'm after. So, okay, so it sounds like you are clear that you want your first sexual experience to be with someone you're actually in a relationship with.
Okay, so that's a desire that changes things.
Versus just, you just want to fucking break the seal. You just want to get fucked and then have that open so you can, whatever comes after. Those are very two different approaches. Again, I hope you notice with both of us, we have no judgment either way. I don't think either one of us has a preference for you either way. It really is about you just being clear on what you want, and then how do you go about doing that. And here it sounds like you are very clear. While you go to these kink type events and have been exploring your submissive side, you're interested in, how do I meet a woman and have her see you as a potential romantic and sexual partner that with a desire to form a relationship with you. So you also put into your question that you have the sense that you have disconnected from some aspect of your masculinity or your sexuality, possibly tied up in what you put in here, that there's a fetish in there. Sounds like it's your submissive quality that you have shame around. And I remember you posting about this earlier in our Evolve Masculine Brotherhood Facebook group. You could evolvemasculine.com/brotherhood. That'll get you there. That you identify as a submissive man. You experience your greatest sense of turn on from women who are more aggressive, who are in the more dominant role, who you would give, you hand over your power to in one form or another. But then there's some sense inside of you that with this fetish that you have, you're not going. Women are not interested in that. Most women do not. They want something particular from a man, and you don't know how to connect to that. You don't know if you even want that, and therefore, women aren't going to want to be with you. First of all, am I understanding you correctly? Short answer first while you write your longer one helps, so we can keep this thing moving along. I'm going to assume that I have that correctly until I read otherwise. So I think that you generally. Okay. Again, feel free to keep fleshing that out, but I have to continue in the meantime. That I think that you haven't nailed right that the shame is likely your biggest roadblock to having what it is that you're wanting. Because the truth is, while there are many women who are not particularly interested in being with a submissive man, there are plenty of women in this world who that is their own, either that they think of that already as their own fetish, or they're at a minimum just open to it. But the more you're able to stand in that and own that about yourself, that this is what you want, then the more it is for you to kind of call that in, for you to track that, for you to even go after them.
And there's also, I want to make a distinction. There's a very large difference between being a submissive in a BDSM context and being a submissive in a relationship entirely, right? So a BDSM relationship where you are a sub and a relationship where you just more play the submissive role are two different things.
Okay, so one caveat, which I think you keep kind of obliquely touching on, is in American society right now, particularly, we seem to have a really big thing about labels and identity. And I on one hand recognize the value that can bring, but I am also very aware of what I consider its major shadow side. It's the flaw in that type of approach is that I believe that we are ultimately infinite beings. We have limitless capacity of who we are and how we create ourselves in the world, and that sometimes when we're having a particular desire, a particular experience, suddenly we can create a whole identity around this is who I am. And when maybe, I mean, and if you want that to be the whole of who you are and how you are and what you're not, etc., then fine and go for it. But I guess my larger point is it's also possible that these submissive desires that you have are a part of you, and that there are other parts of you that, as you kind of touched upon, exist inside of you, you're just disconnected from.
And I'm going to jump in here and say that one of those parts of you is likely your own dominant side. So the advice that I would give to a man who's desiring to be a dominant or to play the dominant role in a relationship, in order to be trusted in that role, it's likely that he's going to need to understand the experience of and be able to embody his own submissive qualities so that he can show up in a real understanding of what the other role is and the interplay therein. So my suggestion to you, which I believe you've already intuited based on some of your comments, is that you intuit that many women want you to be able to lead them and turn them on. Many of them respond most directly to more dominant energy, right? So the more that you're able to actually embody that dominant energy, the more you're going to be able to create polarity and resonance with a lot of these women, the more you're going to be able to make requests for submissive roles that you desire.
So, I think that's where we are really nailing into a deeper truth for you, because as you say, you're right, you don't actually identify as a submissive man, but rather a man who likes to play the role of submissive. So personally, if I have to choose an identity, I could identify as a switch, meaning that I'm comfortable with moving between either of these roles, more dominant and more submissive, and yet I find myself in the dominant role, I don't know, 80 to 90% of the time, mostly for a similar reason that you're touching upon, because it's actually been rarer in my life that I find a woman who I felt could actually dom me well, and who I felt safe enough to put myself into their hands in that way and felt like I was in good hands. And then at the same time, the dominant part of myself, which I'm very good at, and in more cases seemed to be expected, and where she was more comfortable and used to being in that more submissive side anyway. So it was just it was easier for me to control the situation. It was easier for me to guide, to know that I would have a positive outcome, because I knew how good I had gotten in that dom role. I didn't necessarily know how good she was going to be in that role. So rather than risk the sense of disappointment, I was just like, fuck it, I'll just take over and lead it. So my point is, I think that you're, I like what you're saying here. You have the ability, like, you enjoy playing the submissive role, and you further say that there are definitely more dominant masculine parts of yourself and you're feeling disconnected from. So again, as I said in our Facebook group, I think that you're in the right place, that this whole journey it can be is about reconnecting to these more dominant or more masculine aspects, the wider masculine aspects, sides of yourself. And first and foremost, I want to ask you right now, or invite you right now, like, can you give yourself permission? Have you given yourself permission to actively explore these more dominant, more masculine aspects of yourself? Have you given yourself that permission?
And I want to add one more thing here. And you asked in the chat a very direct question. How do I bring out these parts of me? Well, I would suggest just doing things and requesting things that are outside of your comfort zone. So, for example, if you happen to be at a kink event, you could make a request of somebody to enact something dominant, right? So, I would love to, tie you up and hit you with this flogger and call you names. How do you feel about that, right? That's a great start. So you are engaging with actions that are more dominant, and of course at first you're going to feel a little more hesitant when you go up to a woman to make that request. It's likely you're going to sweat and feel weird about it, and she's going to have to reassure you that it's okay. But simply engaging with that energy is going to give you more comfort with it.
It's interesting. I do want to say for the record that the example that Michael gave is just one possible expression.
Yeah.
Personally, I've never been one into calling women names in that way.
I love degradation.
Yeah, I don't. My manner of dominance. I don't know. Sometimes we refer to it as sacred dominance. It's I like to play with the more subtle energetics of it. So much of it can be done without any words at all. It's done right here in an energy that's being held first, like really grounded and rooted in myself, and my power and my potency really being directed and penetrating through my eyes and holding them from that place. Like there's so much in that, and then from there, it can be like these kind of sharp or intense actions where she feels very, very like held and yet in control, and yet safe at the same time, creating those types of dominant, the things I think we're addressing this from a BDSM context primarily because you brought in that kink element, but I kind of feel like we should draw back, put that to the side for a moment, because of where your larger desire is not necessarily about engaging on that kink level. Playing with these elements around, holding your masculine energy go far beyond or far outside of just these kink realms, but really about, as you say here, you probably had not given yourself permission to actively explore this part of you. And so I guess I'm going to say to you right now, are you willing to give yourself that permission right now? Right now. Can you give yourself permission right now to just allow this point to be the start of you consciously, actively exploring your masculine part of yourself? It's not about making the feminine parts of yourself or your submissive part of yourselves wrong. No, it's not about getting rid of them. No, you can continue to have those parts of yourself. You can continue to enjoy those parts of yourself, and begin to actively explore this other part of you. Josh, that you feel nervous about it. First of all, I'm really appreciating your engagement here, and I really feel you really engaged here. I understand you feeling nervous about it. I think that's normal and an indication of how transformative it has the power to be for you.
And one of the easiest ways to begin to engage with it while being terrified is to say, I feel absolutely terrified about asking you this, and I'm going to do it anyway. Here's your question.
Okay. You're going to hear Michael and I are coming at this from different angles, so try not to get overwhelmed. It is what I want. It's just fucking terrifying. So I just want to take this little step back from where Michael is guiding you at the moment, which is very much the action state. The like, okay, you have this woman in front of you and make this request, and really step back to, you have yet to be able to say out loud and to write these words that you are ready to give yourself permission to explore this part of yourself. And to me, that's step one. And don't underestimate how big that step one can be. Up until this point, and it's quite clear based on this conversation, up until this point, you have not given yourself that permission.
Bonus points for writing it, posting it on all your dating profiles, and on Facebook publicly.
Step before that, write it here in this chat box. You know, you've been posting so many other things. Find that place inside of you. I personally believe very strongly that you would not be here right now, engaged in this conversation with us right now, if you were not ready for this step.
Agreed.
I get that you're nervous. I get.
Thanks, man.
I get that you're nervous. I get that it is scary. And one of the reasons why I get it is because, I went through my own version of this, which is why I see it in you. You know, I write about this in my book, which, by the way, I honestly, especially for you, I'd really recommend that you get Amazon or whatever the fuck you want, The Evolved Masculine. That because you read about my journey, especially in the first section of the book, and how disconnected I was from my own masculine parts of myself, and how I had not given myself permission to know this part of myself. I was afraid of this part of myself. I had judged this part of myself. I had judged other men. I had massive fucking wounds when it came to other men and masculinity and my own masculinity. And so I cut these parts of myself. And I had to come to a place of giving myself permission. I'm hoping that as you are finding that place within yourself, Josh, that you can start with hearing me. And if it's at all helpful, Josh, I am giving you permission to explore your masculinity, to find the rightness and goodness of your masculinity within yourself. And I believe very strongly that as you do, and as you start to really unlock this part of yourself, open up this part of yourself, that you will, what you have to offer, it not only will it make you more able to have what it is that you want to come in, what you're able to offer others in the world will be so much more as a result. If there's a good chance, based on experience, my own and others, that the reason why this is so scary for you, the reason why it's still so hard for you to write these words in the chat box right now, is because you've experienced trauma that has, from a man, from men in your life, from your father, from brothers, from whatever. I don't know your particular story, but that trauma may have led you to decide on some level some time ago that you don't want to be that, and so cut off from this part of you. This is what I experienced. This is what I've seen so many different times. So if this relates to you, then it isn't just a choice of, okay, take on these more like toxic masculine attributes, or just couldn't disconnect yourself from your masculinity. There really is a third option, and that's what the Evolved Masculine is all about. It is to lay out this third option, is to lay out this light path, this lighthouse to draw you towards a direction that you can be inspired by and can aspire towards. So if you don't want to be this other poor examples that you've experienced around men and masculinity, then walk this path to become the type of man that you want to see more of in the world.
I know you're listening more closely to Destin, but I'll tell you this, and this is what I say to every man in your position. There's a lot of them. Is that the man that you're afraid of becoming, the toxic whatever, you're never going to be that. It's literally impossible from your starting position to become that with the sets of beliefs and the experiences that you've had, which is why I would direct you most clearly towards concrete, massive action towards actually just embodying it in the world, which is generally why I take that approach.
I think that the way he says, as far as that massive action, is That's why he's saying that thing of just take on something bold and do it, and then allow that to affect your nervous system and have some sort of clear lived experience.
Right. And because you're never going to be that man, the responses that you get from taking that action is going to be most likely much gentler and easier than you would fear.
So again, if you read my book, I have a chapter each for that addresses relationship to dad and relationship to mom, and you can both find something in there and hopefully open up something that will be a part of your healing around each of those wounds. Because the truth is, most of us carry some deep mother wound and or some deep father wound, most of us. And those wounds, whether we care to admit it to ourselves or not, are affecting our adult relationships until or unless we actively confront them and move through it and truly heal it. So maybe today's not the time for you, Josh. Maybe you're not yet ready to even write the words in the chat box right now that you are ready to just begin the exploration. Notice I'm not saying okay, as of today, I will be my masculine dominant self. I'm not saying that at all. It's giving yourself permission, starting now, to start your exploration. It may unfold over the course of days, weeks, months, years, but it's shifting your direction. And now you're going this way instead of this way. And over the course of time, that gap between those two areas becomes wider and wider and wider.
You did it.
There you go. I am ready to begin the exploration of my masculine dominant self. Fuck yeah, Josh. Yeah, you are. So, short-term things. One, get the book. I really believe it's going to help you considerably. On Kindle, it's less than $10. You really like that language? Awesome. First, let's put it up here. On Kindle, it's less than $10. I also have an audible version and a paperback and hardcover to whatever works best for you. Go through each chapter, but also questions at the end of the chapter that will really help just focus your mind in different ways. This whole first section on self as creator, this whole first section is around helping you really okay, so who is the man that you want to be? Who is the version of you that has, that's several steps down the path of exploring his masculine dominant self? Who is he? What would he look like and be like? What's different in how he engages with women? How is different in how he engages other men? What's different in how he engages his work? What's different in how he walks down the street? And how it's different in how he dresses and presents himself. Pulling out all these little details about who he is, so that then as you start to crystallize that image more and more, we can start to pull it, start to make these little shifts towards stepping into being him and doing so now. The other thing, I believe, you've already joined the Evolved Masculine Brotherhood, our free Facebook group. It's brand new, so give that time as well to develop. Your posts in there help in its development, but we're going to continue to provide more resources to help and support that process, as well as we'll be relaunching very soon a larger program for men who are in similar positions to yourself, who want to specifically take this area of their life on, step into their most evolved masculine self, as I call it.
Next question.
Anyway, we did a lot with you, Josh, here. I hope that this is a help for you. Please keep us in the loop. You're doing great. You showed up, and as I said to Michael all those years ago, just keep showing up and you'll be fucking amazed as to what changes you end up creating as a result.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. All right, that's probably the biggest of these questions.
Let's do the short one next.
Yeah, okay, let's do this. Is the easy one. And I suppose this one is more directed at me. It says, This is from Sebastian. Do you, hi Sebastian, by the way, do you integrate the chakra system with your teachings? If yes, how? If no, is there a particular reason why? I guess it's sort of an answer to both of those, because I do and I don't. I do, but I tend to more covertly. So for those of you who have been through or seen or listened to the Evolved Masculine Blueprint, which would also be very valuable for you, Josh, I'll be sharing it within the group sometime in the near future, and if you're on my email list, we'll send it out through there as well. But if you go through the Evolved Masculine Blueprint, if you are into like the chakra energy system, you may notice that I follow the basic the basic layout of that chakra system with the blueprint. It is in many ways helped inform how I first envisioned my evolved masculine self, because I do have very strong roots in tantra and neo tantra and tantric sexuality, and it has had a major effect on how I came to see the world and sexuality and energy and personal and spiritual growth. And so I just kind of did that through a particular male lens and masculine lens, and then I kind of built it together in a way that touches each of the major teachings around each of the chakra points, but I do so largely without naming it. So this asks, so why? I've been doing it for a very long time, probably a decade, and the fact is, over that time, the world has changed. There is, especially with our social media, where it is today, it's a lot easier to find and connect to far more people who are into things like that. But at the time when I first started really teaching and leading it, the number of people who actually like cared about knowing anything about chakras was pretty fucking limited, and so was my belief anyway at the time. So while it added great value to me, I just felt like I'd be able to reach more people if I just removed that aspect of the language and stripped away anything I felt was fluff or unnecessary, and brought it down to sort of like the brass tacks, the part that's like fucking applicable to any man, and that any man can really just like connect to. So that's the basic answer there. So there's our short one. Next up, Richard. How do you balance vulnerability with strength? Or when is being totally honest with your struggles, say with porn or infidelity, a big mistake? Or putting this together, how do you balance or move between transparency and performance?
I will begin with this one because transparency and vulnerability are kind of a thing that I do publicly, regularly, on an ongoing basis. And the thing that I will address this as two separate questions. So how do you balance vulnerability with strength? The first answer that I'd give to that is that by and large, they are the same thing. Right? Vulnerability is strength. It is courage. It is the ability to bear the self and share what's actually going on. That being said, it's important to recognize context. So there may be some contexts in which and many men love to point to this, is that your vulnerability can be weaponized against you, right? Which is the reason why so many men are scared to death of being vulnerable, because they've experienced so many times in the past where their vulnerability has been used against them, like for example, in a relationship, or with in competition with another man, or this, that, or the other thing, because there are many contexts in which being vulnerable is not actually going to be met well, which takes wisdom to be able to discern where those contexts are, where it is valuable to you to be vulnerable, and in what contexts is it more valuable for you to self-veil, right? Or to, what do I reveal in this context? Now, largely, I say that in the context of a relationship, ideally, your vulnerability, your complete vulnerability and transparency is your strength, as well as with a brother, right? Someone who is really there in support of you. Your vulnerability is power, right? In the context of mixed company, perhaps, like, depends on what your relation, what? Depends on, is this, for example, in a courtroom? Is this with your family that you maybe have a more complicated relationship with, where it's not relevant at this time? Now that can be complicated too, because becoming more vulnerable, becoming more transparent with those who have commonly with whom you've not generally been transparent or open can be a powerful act as well. And just standing in yourself, standing in your truth, standing in your being in a context in which you have not before can also be a powerful act.
Yeah, I want to, I guess, kind of back up that the more you are connected to your own power, the more you have built the ability to self-validate versus like needing, seeking that validation from outside of you, from other people. The more confident in yourself you are. Hell, the more you have community and people around you who are just, in unconditional support of you, the easier it is to open yourself up in that kind of vulnerability in other places, because regardless of what happens out there, how this person or that person reacts, you're good. It doesn't fucking touch you. You're good.
It can also be a process where when you begin to come out more in that way, some people are going to have negative reactions, right? And that is unavoidable. And
I'm many years into it, and believe me, I still get negative reactions.
Right. But by and large, your people are the people who are going to support you in being transparent, in being honest, in being vulnerable. And the people who judge you, frankly, unless they're your family, and sometimes not even then, you don't need them around you. What are they offering you?
And too often, folks end up, I don't know, feeling stuck and remaining in connection to people who, just by default, it's just like, oh well, this person's just there and has been, in my life, even though, if you look at it with open eyes, they've always kind of been a drain. Feed more of the negative stories that you have about yourself, rather than helping lift you up and becoming what you're wanting to be and are capable of. So this again is a big reason why I'm a fan of community and brotherhood, the masculine brotherhood, so that you, regardless of your day-to-day life or the people you have surrounded yourself with prior, you can connect in with a group of other men who will hold you to your highest, who are there to help see both who you are and who you are committed to becoming, and rather than just see you in your flaws or see you based on your worst mistakes, right, or anything just from your past.
Cool. And then the second question, I believe, can you go back to the wording? Yeah. Okay, was transparency versus performance. I think this is a really important question, especially in the age of social media, where you see all of these, people doing men's work who are making all these big vulnerable shares and vulnerable posts and whatnot. And there's a question of, well, is this person, for what reason is this person sharing this? Is this person sharing their vulnerable experience in order to get clients? Is this person sharing their vulnerable experience in order to become more of a leader? Like, what is the reason behind the share, right? When is it a performance versus when is it something that's really coming from the heart? And that is, that's an open question, because it's person from person. There are people out there who use their vulnerable expression to manipulate as a tool. I don't necessarily like using this word, but it is like a narcissistic trait oftentimes to use vulnerability as a tool of manipulation, right? And all it takes is becoming more familiar with it, practicing it yourself, and then being able to discern, somebody's motivations, to be able to feel them, hear them beneath their words and see them beneath their actions is one of my friends, Francesca, likes to say.
So if you're really interested in exploring more about this powerful vulnerability conversation, 2 episodes ago, episode 8, I had my friend and colleague Monique Darling on, and this was the focus of our conversation. This is a woman whose life path and career path have been rooted in this exploration of powerful vulnerability. So do check that out, whether on our Twitch channel or wherever you're watching this or listening to this. We're still working on some of our tech and distribution of this podcast. So do check that out. Okay.
What's next?
Where is the balance? Hold on. This is from Jinn. Which when I hear that name, I think of like a genie.
Yeah.
Did that come up? Okay.
Yep, you got it.
Here we go. Where is the balance between holding space for a woman's emotions and when is the time to call out bullshit? Great question, Jen. I have struggled with that one at various points as well. Michael and I were discussing this ahead of time as well. Why don't you get started here?
Well, I think this is a question where the answer largely depends on what your relationship with that person is. So is this an intimate partner? Is this a friend? I'm going to assume in this context that it's an intimate partner. And the calling out bullshit strikes me as a desire to oftentimes people will do that with the intention to change another human being, and that's simply not something that you can do. So in this context, if you see a pattern of behavior where the person continually goes into these big emotional loops, and it feels like either you need to plug those loops or you need to withdraw yourself and let them sort themselves out, but something isn't changing and you're feeling frustrated with it. If you attempt to call out their bullshit and attack them and say, you keep doing this and you keep doing that and blah, 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 right? And why don't you just, take hold of your own power in this situation? In the context of an intimate relationship, that just doesn't work. Never has worked, never will work. And the best thing that you can do is determine what you want your relationship with that pattern to be. Is it something that's so disruptive to your life that you need to establish boundaries surrounding your engagement with it? So, for example, when you're like this, I cannot productively engage with you, so I'm going to remove myself until you are able to self-soothe in this case, right? So in this case, your locus of control is not external. Your locus of control is internal. And that is one way to productively engage with it. But if you're calling out bullshit in an intimate relationship, honestly, the problem is not with them. The problem is with you.
So I'm going to be a yes to everything Michael shared and just add to it as well that when I was first really grappling with these types of questions, which I'm going to say was around 2006, 2007, David Deda's work and The Way of the Superior Man was everywhere in my little bubble in the San Francisco conscious community, what have you. And the message seemed to be, you just got to be that fucking rock. You've got to be the anchor in the storm of a woman's emotions so that she can feel safe to express anywhere, anything, and you can hold it. And I'm like, okay, then that's what I will learn how to do. And boy, did that fuck me up. I think that there's a much greater complexity to the truth than that answer. That yes, it was very valuable to me to learn how to not just get reactive to her emotional response. It's very valuable for me. Hell, while I've grown dramatically, it's still an ongoing journey for me. However, there is something to be said about boundaries and knowing where your boundaries are and what your capacity is where your capacity is to hold this situation in any given moment. Because if you're moving beyond where your capacity is, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem, whether it's because things spiral out in that moment, or because you deplete yourself over time, or because you develop resentment over time. In one form or another, we need to learn to be able to give what we are capable of giving unconditionally. And once we're beyond like what we can hold or give unconditionally, it's more of our ability to understand where our boundary is and how to communicate and maintain that boundary.
Yeah.
Now, from there, you can learn to continue to cultivate your capacity to hold her emotion, but it may also be, as Michael stated, it may be that you get clear that this is more than you want to hold.
Now, I got to say that I come from a background of being endlessly forgiving, endlessly tolerant, endlessly patient, and that it's been a journey for me to learn how to identify when somebody's behavior is negatively impacting me, and more clearly and earlier setting boundaries surrounding it to protect my own health and well-being, because I've literally destroyed my life trying to hold space for what is frankly I'm going to avoid the word bullshit, but like a woman's wounding.
Ditto. Yeah, I mean that's. I think this is where some of my shared experience with Michael really stand, and not all men have that propensity that he and I both share here. And for them, it is more the opposite medicine. It is about learning how to be more compassionate. It is about learning to hold greater space, about being able to deepen your understanding and empathy for a woman's emotions and her expression. That's the case for a lot of men. And I think it's important for us to understand that men can fit anywhere on this range where you are to get the right medicine for you.
I'm going to respond to you directly, Trish. What about men's wounding? Well, I'll tell you what. My wounding was what caused me to be endlessly permissive, endlessly sitting in the fire of a woman's tears, like sitting on the sidewalk, just listening to her stories hour after hour after hour and wondering why it never got better. Because that was, for me, that was my wounding. I felt that in order to prove my value or prove my worth, I needed to be that man to save her, to liberate her from that suffering. That was my wounding, right?
Again, ditto.
Yeah. So that's what I would respond to that. Now, everybody's wounding is different, right? Some men are the ones who are continually looping themselves, right? And I'm sure I've done that at various points, but everybody's is different.
That's
a good question.
Trish also asked about
loaded.
Yeah, it was a very loaded question. How do you coach men and women to take accountability for their impact on others? Well, yes, I do primarily focus my work on men, so that's where I'm going to focus my answer here, with the caveat that there, especially in the more quote unquote progressive sides of the conversation, there in the US, there is a lot of talk these days about men needing to take more accountability for their impact on others. And the truth is, my life experience has shown me that there are plenty of women out there who refuse to take any accountability for their impact on others and their impact on men. And particularly what I found for women who fit under this, that because they've grasped onto our larger narrative that men are the perpetrator, so women are the victims, they can take on this mindset that they can do anything, they can be any way, and there's no accountability there. There's nothing wrong with. They can't do anything wrong because they're the victim. You as a man, you're the one to be concerned about. You're the one who needs to be taking accountability. So I think it is important for us to have that broader conversation. And now that I've made that caveat, I'll answer your question more directly here. How do I coach men to take accountability for their impact on others?
Now, I have a question. Is that you personally like Destin and I, or like you personally as in the general you, like you, Trish? Because
I think it's
same
ask
answer.
me anything. So,
okay, all right. It's you. How do you? All right,
and you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's ask me and Michael.
Okay.
Ask Michael and me. So, I don't often start there. My tendency is to start with the man's relationship to himself and his understanding of the world. And with my coaching work, particularly, I find that it's most effective to start with every person and every man has the pains that he's trying to get away from and that which he's desiring or yearning and trying to reach towards. And so that's usually my starting place, is trying to understand what each of those two things are and help him see that I can help him get out of his pain and towards in the direction of what it is that he's desiring, assuming it is true. If I don't think that that's true, I refer him out. But that to me has to be step one, because that's what creates trust. That creates an opening for him to actually listen to anything else that I have to say or share. Without that, it just comes across as what he likely already experiences in an abundance in the world, which is you should be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. Which to me often lacks any sense of empathy, compassion, and understanding, which are the very things that I believe we need to be supporting men in cultivating in themselves. And we can't support men in cultivating empathy, compassion, and understanding within themselves if you don't approach them with understanding, empathy, and compassion.
Additionally, I'm going to add that any man who opens himself up to men's work or coaching, I very rarely encounter a man in my coaching profession who has an aversion to taking responsibility or accepting accountability for their impact on others. Rarely. It's usually the men who aren't open to coaching, who don't seek out betterment, that are the ones who really could benefit from taking that accountability, which it's sad, but it's true.
Yes. So I feel like there's one more thing I want to say around this. And folks, if you have any further questions, now is the time to share them or send them in. Otherwise, Michael and I might just shoot the shit. So him taking accountability. Yeah, so I often find that when a man is in the presence of another man or other men who he respects, then there is often a desire to take that accountability. There is a desire to rise up, essentially, to rise up in his capacity and what he is capable of being. This is why I think a lot of the issues are rooted in we don't have the proper structures in place in our society by and large. There are things changing around that, things like this, but we've lost rites of passage, for as a prime example, in much of modern industrialized, particularly Western societies, where and we've lost that strong sense of tribe or community, where men are holding each other accountable, where men are holding each other to a higher standard, and drawing each other up. And I feel like lacking those pieces, we fumble around too much. We have so many mixed messages as men around what we're supposed to be and not supposed to be, and what success even is, let alone then how to get there. I understand on one hand we're just kind of adding to all those sets of messages, but hopefully there's some core truths that can cut through some of the noise. And yes, thank you, Trish. I've always recognized that about you over the years, that you are a woman who does carry a lot of compassion and love for men. And I want to thank you for your work and where you come from in that regards. You know, this is the first time I've like engaged with you in a very long time. So, Michael, I think this is the core of what has come in, unless I'm missing something, which is very possible because
I think it's the core of what's come in. But I was asked a question by a random person that I could presence here.
Please.
So I mentioned sexual self-mastery, right? And the question was, what the fuck do you do?
What do you do with what?
What do you do? What is this?
What is sexual self-mastery? What do you do? What is the person who's doing it do? Like what are you talking about?
What do you do?
Me?
Yeah. You.
Me. I wasn't even there.
Yeah, I know you weren't there, but I'm going to ask you that question because, you know, like there's a lot of people who don't know.
Are you speaking specifically about sexual self-mastery or in general?
Yes. Okay. When you tell people, when you get, for example, I was at a party and it said like, okay, well, I'm leading this thing called sexual self-mastery, right? And they're just like, okay, what? And I got called a penis whisperer. So
you are a penis whisperer.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So you had to answer that question, and now you're like Destin. Now,
how do you answer that
Destin
question?
on the spot.
Yep.
Well, I'm not. I don't necessarily lead with that part. Yeah, I'll usually, if that's the case, then bring it back to the larger umbrella of this body of work being around the evolved masculine, about supporting men. Who are actively seeking how to be better men and how to have healthy relationships to their masculinity and how to navigate all these conflicting messages. And as well as, one of the core elements of where we've gotten a lot of fucked up messaging and programming has been around our sexuality, as I've more recently really come to think of it as, everything we've been taught about men's sexuality is wrong. It's just fucking wrong. And there's like, what is available to us, what's possible for us to experience is so much more incredible and so much broader than what we've been taught and trained. And that this wider expanse of what's available to us, when we tap into that, our lovers are generally really happy, because it's usually tapping into something that's in, especially our more feminine lovers, that she's already really wanting or yearning for, and often I find is experiencing in short supply, or if at all, or is certainly well, not certainly, but more often than not, it experiences as underfed. And that third area, as mentioned earlier, being about how to form healthier relationships with women and understand what is going on for women on a larger collective level, as well as a particular woman in your life. So with sexual self-mastery, since we're not intended to be a plug, but all right, this as core, it's really about learning to master your sexual energy, to learn to connect to it as an energy in the first place. It's not just, oh, you're horny or you're not, you're hard or you're not. Oh, you're hard, okay, then do the thing that you do to fucking drive yourself towards towards popping and ejaculating, or in which case you're done, or do everything you can to like not ejaculate and just focus on like not ejaculating, control and tighten down, think about baseball statistics and what have you, to not that. Again, this is where I'm back to, there's so much more available to us, and learning to be able to like tune into these subtle things that are happening in our body, that there are these neural pathways that we have trained our bodies with, especially with the ubiquity of hardcore internet porn and most men's relationship to it, where we've trained often from a young age that like to be efficient, like to do it in a very particular way, often to get it done relatively quickly so that you can move on to whatever else you've got to do in your day, or to go to sleep, as that sleeping aid.
It's common.
What?
I just said that's common.
Yeah. So again, I'm always big on like, this is never, I don't ever want to make you feel like you have to take like I'm taking something away from you. Whatever is working for you or you enjoy, fucking have at it. I just want to help expand your sense of possibility, allow you to have more choices than you currently feel that you have, and to know those things within your body. I mean, that to me is where like real freedom lives. So okay, so you have those ways that you masturbate. Okay, well, what else? We sexual self mastery, because we start here. As we shift the relationship in here to your own body, to your own sexuality, to your own sexual nervous system, to your own pleasure, then everything's going to change in how you show up as a lover with your lovers. How you approach her body is going to change dramatically when you experience your own body in a new way. As you understand these nuances of how sexual energy actually flows in your body, and you're able to move it both up through your body, not just build up, pop out the tip of your cock, then it's a lot easier for you to help her move sexual energy through her body as well. When you start to engage your entire body as part of your sexual experience, instead of, as most men do, being all dick focused, and start to experience the rewards that come from starting to really engage your entire body and teach your entire body that it is all part of the sexual experience, which also tends to lead towards experiencing full body orgasms instead of just more genitally based, then you are far more likely to start to approach her entire body as part of her sexual experience, which women tend to respond very, 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 very well to, which then also expands her orgasmic potential and the pleasures that she experiences and the potency of the pleasures that she experiences in her body. Did I answer your question?
Long answer, but yes.
Yeah, I tend to do that. I mean, yeah, while I can sometimes do like, here's your 3-step method to X, Y, or Z, like our society tends to thrive on that a lot. Like, just pop this pill here, do this thing, and then that's the answer. My work around the evolved masculine really is about true and lasting transformation, deep transformation, change, and that's not about the 3 psychological tricks to get her to spread her legs for you tonight. It is an internal commitment, like we were beginning to open with Josh near the start of this episode here. That point of making that declaration decision that now begins the first day of that exploration of his masculinity, it is a first step on a path. It's more like being a gardener and cultivating crops, or a farmer for that matter, where you've got to fucking be out there every day and water those crops and make sure it's getting the sun and nutrients that it needs. You take these things on and you just start to give them your attention, and step by step over time, watch your life changes in better and better in what can be absolutely fucking incredible, life-changing ways, including incredibly pleasurable ways. So this is always, all of this around the evolved masculine. Like, yes, we cover sex and the bedroom stuff quite a bit, but it is just as much outside the bedroom as it is inside the bedroom.
I feel like I should give you a standing ovation.
Hey, Mo, you can do it. I'll always take it. Yeah. Thank you. This is me bowing if you're just listening. So we have a little bit of time left, and we have some shy lurkers here. So in the meantime, I guess last week's episode, we had both you, Michael, as well as Bodhi and Joao on, where we spoke about each of your crisis points in your life, as well as the major transformations that you've experienced. I guess that I'm curious if there's anything that you want to add as far as like next steps from there, like either like where you're at now.
Where I'm at now. Okay. With what?
Yeah, again, to give for those who haven't watched last week episode 9 yet, you went through a massive crisis point. I guess it's around 7 years ago now, where heroin addicted pregnancy.
I remember.
And the partner being the heroin addict. Child protection services getting involved. Custody battle with the state. Life in absolute shambles. And through your engagement with the Evolved Masculine, amongst other things you did, but we'll just put the focus there. Radically turned your life around. What I mean, most importantly, like, what's different about who you are today versus the man you were 7 years ago?
That's a great question. So 7 years ago, I was largely doing the thing that I thought that I was supposed to be doing in the world. I had been raised kind of very bookish, and had followed an academic path. And, as it happens to be, this major life disaster, catastrophe, shift, etc., had me ask the question, okay, well, doing what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing in life has brought me to this place of utter, chaos. So why am I doing what I think that I should be doing? What would be possible if I actually lived my life according to what I wanted to be doing, rather than what I thought it was possible for me to do, given my set of starting conditions and resources available to me and connections available to me and everything else, right? And to ask myself that question and to be in that exploration, which I had never really given myself the ability or the license or permission to do prior. So when I really asked that question, I came to the determination that I did not want to be working a regular job as an employee for a company or an academic institution or a school or anything like that. That I had been absolutely miserable in those contexts, and that it caused me to just seek out chaos and distractions outside of that to abate the soul-numbing nature of the activities that I was engaged in on a day-to-day basis. And partly, I chose to dedicate my life and a large portion of my energy towards that which it caused me to come to that realization and caused me to claim my own creative power in the world, which was working with men, or transformational work in general, because it hasn't always been with the Evolved Masculine, but a large portion of my energy has been dedicated towards furthering this work and becoming a leader within it and making it my own.
So if I understand correctly, the big things that have changed is that have to do with you really taking an ownership over your life, no longer just trying to be in a constant figuring out of what's expected of you, and trying to live into a preordained path, but to really continuously get clear on and hone the vision of what you want to create with your life and be committed to creating that.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
That's all.
You got it.
And so again, if you're watching and listening to this and you're like, fuck, like I want that. Like, I understand ways to feel like I'm living I'm thinking of another former client of mine who spoke of it as like feeling like he was living somebody else's life.
Yeah. The life that was handed to me as opposed to the life that I chose to create. Right. Or, I was operating from the question of what's possible for me. What can I do in terms of, and I would judge it by what's realistic. And I would set out, timelines and plans and something, but there was a sense in which when I was doing this, I had these blinders on, right? There was only, I could only look within a certain range of possibility as I was doing this, like,
And so big part of what this has done has just been take the blinders off, and greatly expand your sense of possibility of what is available to you and how much capacity you really have to create your life and who you are within it.
Correct.
Well, great. That is a great synopsis of what the Evolved Masculine Path is ultimately about. Whether you're taking on specifically from the direction of your sexuality and who you are as a lover or who you are in relationship, or you're taking on from the perspective of who you are as a man and just the specific focus on becoming that version of yourself that deep in your heart you yearn to be, and to believe, come to believe that it is possible for you, and then to again further clarify that vision of what that would be, and then work with these various tools and surrounded by these other men to help you be it, step into it, radically transform your life. It is available for you. And one thing that I've learned, and Michael, again, I always say this about myself, but arguably in certain ways you even more so, your starting point doesn't, you're a great example. Your starting point doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how fucked things are to begin with. It doesn't matter the state that you are in. It doesn't matter how disempowered you have felt in the past. What matters is your willingness to show up and to keep showing up.
We regularly have men coming into this work who are living out of their cars, and they've recently gone through a divorce, or some other huge massive thing has happened in their lives, and they are at some kind of crisis point or low point or inflection point, as some people like to call it. And
inflection point, I mean, it could go in in either direction. And, unfortunately, in getting back to those dark corners of the internet, there are plenty of voices out there, especially in dark corners of the internet, that are happy to kind of take those inflection points, those crisis points in your life and support you in dragging yourself down.
It gets worse, let me tell you.
Where you into a state of commiseration of your pain. And particularly around how the fault is somebody else's, often women or society, or something other than connecting to you, to your own real power. And your real power comes from getting back to what Trish states here, from your willingness to take accountability for your own actions. Yes, that includes like the impact that you've had on other people, but also just means the impact you've had on yourself. The experience that you are having, and taking accountability for your part in this experience that you are having, because that really is the only place where your power lives. It's the only place where, okay, from there you can actually choose something different.
Yes, there are all sorts of fucked up things in the world, all sorts of injustices going on, and all sorts of people who have likely screwed you over, and you can't control them. And you'll never be able to control them. The only thing that you can do is gather yourself up, and from that place, what are you going to do? And why? Yeah. And are you going to be controlled by your fear of all of those things that have come before?
So I want to thank you all for being with us today this is the Decoding Women podcast. Last week's and this week's a little bit less women focused. And there's certainly elements. I will say that these things that we're speaking of, I will like the number of women who are craving, deeply yearning, aching for a man who is willing to be in this exploration, commit to his inner work, introspect enough to even recognize, see these parts of himself. It far exceeds the current supply of men who are actually doing it. So there's your Decoding Women tip. There is that women who themselves have really taken on this growth in their own consciousness and awareness, what their sense of accountability is. The story there is, where are the men? The story there is that there aren't enough men who are really willing to engage in that deep inner work. Now, there's arguments as to whether there's the level of truth in that story or not. But what I can say is, it has seemed that there is a supply and demand issue in your favor here,
especially within these communities. Yes,
that. No, I'm going to say it's beyond these communities, really, because in my erotic rock star years, one of my favorite things to do was to get outside of any of those communities and to be in various muggle worlds of people who had never fucking seen or experienced anybody like me before, and invariably I was in demand. There is something about a man who is committed to his path, to his growth, to consciously exploring his flaws and his shortcomings, and his commitment to becoming more than he was yesterday, that is highly attractive. And you are here, so that part of you is a very attractive part of you.
Another thing I encountered over the weekend was a guy who said, all men want two things: a 6-pack and a giant dick. And there's some degree to which there's truth to that, but there's a question.
A 6-pack?
Yeah.
If I were to pick a second thing, I notice I'm not arguing the dick part. But if I were to pick a second thing, I'm not sure if a 6-pack would be it.
No, I mean, but yeah, it's weird too, because like one's in your control, one's really not. But
the 6-pack.
But at any rate, like another thing that is within one's control is one's like level of commitment to their growth, which I really think is probably the most effective thing that you could put your attention or awareness on if you're seeking to actually have success with women, even more so than a 6-pack or a strap-on. That's it. That's all I got.
100%. I also just realized that I had completely misread you. I thought you were talking about like a 6-pack of beer, and I think
no, a 6-pack in the stomach, right? Yeah,
I used to have one of those. So thank you for joining us. If you are a man who has already committed to this type of growth, then fucking yeah, you're very welcome in their community. If you're a man who's like, fuck, like I want that, I want to that kind of commitment to myself, and really see or believe that there's value in that for you, because there is, then welcome. That's why we have built this. Like Michael and myself, I'll speak for you, but you can always, that our paths have not been easy, and we've put in a lot of very difficult, often painful work. And, the most rewarding things to come from that is helping other men's paths be a bit easier. Seeing that your load lighten because of, how we're able to support you through, things that we didn't necessarily have that same kind of support for.
That's why I'm here.
All right. evolvedmasculine.com/brotherhood. Join us there if you're not in there already. If you have, please do an intro. We want to know who you are. Why? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Be powerfully vulnerable.
Why'd you click?
Yeah. And what is it that, the question I like to ask is like, who is the man that you really are committed to becoming in this world? And then let's help you get there. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Next week, maybe we'll actually get back to decoding women. All right. Thanks. Glad you joined us.